Hi, I'm Hilary Russo. Thanks for joining me for the HIListically Speaking podcast. I'm a certified holistic health coach and havening techniques practitioner, lover of great conversation, and of course, clever wordplay, HIListically speaking. So welcome to an empowering place where my guests share their transformational stories of trauma to triumph through health, healing, and humor. It's the ultimate brain candy as we find out who we are, how we got that way, and what it takes to be a happy and healthy grown-up. And be kind to your mind. I'm glad you're here. How do you want to die? I know, loaded question. Listen, as I get older, I find myself having more and more conversations about death and dying. And you know what? It's okay, because it's natural. And when it comes to that question, how do you want to die? The answers tend to range from, I want to die peacefully in my sleep, to, I want to be surrounded by loved ones. Well, of course we want these things. But let's take it one step further. Death is a part of life. We know that. So why not live it? When the time comes, are there stories that you want to make sure you share with the people close to you? Secrets that you want to reveal to be at peace with yourself? Perhaps your wishes have changed and you want to let your family know that there's a new plan in the works. Or maybe, just maybe, you want to have a great big party to celebrate life and legacy. Yeah, it's all good. So Dana Humphrey is part of that process. She's a death doula, and her mission is to help her clients make beautiful choices as they complete their circle of life. Choices that help share their legacy, add ritual back into dying, something many cultures have been doing for thousands of years. So imagine a celebration that you not only planned, but planned to attend with joy, love, support, and if you want, even a little glitter. Yeah, Dana can make that happen too. Because as an advocate for her clients, she wants them to experience a good death, that place where you are truly at peace before you are at peace and beyond. So on this episode of HIListically Speaking, Dana shares more about what it means to be a death doula and how her own courageous shift in her life helped her find that inner peace that allows her to support others on their beautiful journey from life to death. Dana Humphrey, such a pleasure to have you on HIListically Speaking. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you.
This is really a topic that I was so unfamiliar with. The topic of death in general is one that really can scare people. I know that I actually had some upsets and battles with just loss, with losing people close to me. But the work you do as a death doula is really quite beautiful, from what you shared with me in a prior conversation on how we're really how your work is to help people to cross. And I imagine it's for the person who's doing the crossing, but also for those around them that care and love them, and how the transition could be a more powerful, spiritual, and meaningful journey. So looking forward to hearing what you have to share.
Yeah, thank you. So really, I learned about death doula work from my friend who is a dentist, and she turned me on to INELDA. It's the International Network of Death Doulas. And really, a lot of people have heard of birth doulas, and that's something that's pretty common, is when someone is coming into this world, that the mom-to-be likes to have a birth doula to really be their advocate, help them with their breath, all of those things. And in the last 10 years, it's also been gaining in popularity, this concept of death doula. And we're really there to add ritual back into the dying process. And we really are there to be an advocate for the dying person, to make sure that their needs are listened to. It could be that, when they were younger, they bought a plot of land and they thought that they wanted to be buried somewhere. But as they got older, their ideas changed, and maybe their family is not familiar with the way that their ideas have changed. So we're just there to listen, to be, to bring presence, to hold space, to bring a holding hand. You know, sometimes we just sit with the person and hold their hand and let them know that we're there for them. And it's really to help the person have a good death.
I find that very intriguing, what you just mentioned about, people we're so in this mindset we need to prepare for. Have you prepared? Have you written your will? Do you have your plot? Especially the older generation, because there is that fear of death, even especially as I see my mother getting older and people around me who I love getting older, as they start losing people, it's that fear of mortality is closer to them. So we need to prepare and make sure we're not putting this burden on our children. But what you just said about buying the plot, preparing for this, what we do 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago could completely change as we get older. And just because you made that choice then does not mean you have to stick with that choice now. So it's not just about the actual being in a place where you're so close to crossing over, but it's everything that goes along with it.
Well, it's really bringing presence, bringing active listening,
Mm-hmm.
listening to what the person is saying and what they're not saying, and asking good questions. A lot of times people are carrying secrets or carrying grief. And so we're able to be kind of a safe space where that person can release those. Maybe they're carrying some trauma that happened to them when they were younger that they've never been able to share with their family or their loved ones. And they don't want to burden their family with that information, and they just need to let it out, and they just need to express it some way. So we can be there to receive that, to let them process that, to let go of certain parts of themselves. Sometimes people have certain ideas about themselves. Like I know, for example, like my father likes to talk about when he was an athlete, when he was in college, and that's just like not part of who he is anymore. It's part of the past. And so sometimes like telling these stories and can help grieve these different parts of ourselves, so it's not so monumental when it comes down to the last couple of days. We provide that listening ear. Sometimes people are in a lot of pain, and I really believe that a lot of pain is emotional pain, and we can help with a guided visualization, a guided meditation to help the person, not be so stuck in the emotional pain in their body, but to have some relief that's not pharmaceutical.
Oh, well, you have me at that, because being a holistic health coach and mental health practitioner in the havening world, which is, even though it's neuroscience based, the whole idea is to put the tools in people's own hands and realize that we have the power, and there's such power in thought, So the more we can do to heal ourselves, whatever stage of our lives we're in, the better. And then if we need modern medicine, which there is absolutely a place for it, absolutely, then perhaps it's a nice balance, holistically. It's a good balance. So, but for yourself, I mean, this work is, when I asked you originally, I was like, how in the world did you get into this line of work? Because your life was completely different prior to finding a love and a desire to help people in this area as a death doula. And I'd love for you to touch on that, because we all have a story, right?
Sure. Yeah. I have a degree in public relations, and straight out of college, I started working in the pet industry, working at a pet boutique called Muttropolis. And I quit and I moved to New York City, and I started a PR firm, and I was working exclusively in the pet industry. And I positioned myself as a pet expert. I'm actually the pet lady, and I used to have a regular segment on NBC. I've traveled all around the country doing all kinds of things in the pet industry and going to pet conferences and things like that. And really, when COVID happened, I was on my way en route to Guatemala, and I was going to attend a retreat there. And so I left on March 14th of 2020, and I ended up not coming back until June. And, I had planned to go for about 10 days, and I had packed for about 10 days and ended up, being SIP, stuck in paradise in Guatemala for several months. And during this time, I really had some time and space to reflect on my life and think about what I was using my life force energy towards. And really, for me, marketing and public relations kind of represents telling people about how not good enough they are and how they need these products and services to fill them up. And I shaved my head while I was there and let go of the past and just committed to myself to using my life's energy and my life's work to helping people, not pushing products. So I've been on a little bit of a transition in the last year of switching over from being a marketing person. I've been a marketing professor, done, worn a lot of hats in marketing and public relations, and really transitioning into death doula and life coach to really help people. And that's really what I'm here for.
So this trip to Guatemala, I'm trying to think back because a year prior to that, exactly almost to the date, I was going to Costa Rica. And I'm trying to imagine if I had gone to Costa Rica a year later, would I be in similar shoes to Dana? Because again, I mean, we have very parallel lives in a lot of ways. I mean, working in the industry and marketing and communications, and PR, and the product specialist and being on TV. My whole thing is to bring my purpose and my passion together. I mean, you had this background in media, which is giving you a platform. So now you can use your platform in a new way, which I love because doing that the same. But to go to Guatemala, to stay for, I love that, SIP, is that what you said? Stuck in Paradise?
Yeah.
I love a good acronym. Stuck in Paradise, making this complete transition in your own life. And maybe it's a death and a birth in another way in your own life. Do you see it like that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes, 100%. I mean, really, when I shaved my head, I had a little ceremony of just releasing the past, the present, and the future, and letting go of, those cells, right? That was like part of my hair. And just as a reminder, being in marketing is seductive, and it's been challenging for me to really let that go. And so it's a reminder that I can see every single day when I look at myself that, that identity that I created is no longer here, and I can spend time to live in this new creation of myself that's constantly evolving.
So when SIP was over, and I'm curious, like, what even made you come back? Like, why in June were you like, okay, I'll come back? Like, let's start there. I'm curious with that question.
Okay. All right. So, so I ended up, I got to Guatemala. I was on the last flight into the country. Guatemala closed its borders, closed everything. There was no transportation. And there were 11 people that had also been trying to go to the same retreat that I was going to from all around the world. And so all 12 of us moved into a house together. And so we had people from Israel, from Spain, from UK, from Argentina. I mean, we had a lot of different countries represented, and we were all living in one house together. And we were in a really small town in San Marcos in Guatemala, 500-person town. They definitely knew about the 12 foreigners that were living in a house on the lake together. So they were very worried about us, as they should be. And they came and checked our temperature and our blood pressure every single morning. And I had really high blood pressure the first 2 weeks. Everyone else was fine. I was, of course, the New Yorker had the high blood pressure. And there had been some emergency flights that were potentially available to come back to the U.S. And I decided to stay. And once I decided to stay, my blood pressure went down. And while there were emergency flights back, it was very expensive, and it would have been very challenging for me to get to the airport because every single town was closed. So you had to get permission from every town to transport through. So anyway, I kind of decided that I would come back to the U.S. whenever regular flights were open. And so we lived in this house. There was all 12 of us. There was 5 bedrooms. We cooked together. We switched rooms every 10 days to keep it interesting. And after a couple of months, and we were all working. We were all working from there. So imagine 12 adults all, with various types of jobs, working in the same space. Luckily, we had a huge yard. I set up my office. I had like a little sleeping bag in the front yard, and that was like my little corner office. And then it became rainy season. And it started raining every day. And all 12 of us, while we had kind of dispersed amongst the land, and we had a big piece of grass that we would, be able to have a little bit of time on, we all then were forced inside. So that really shifted. When it became rainy season, it started to be less comfortable. And we were, we already had zero privacy because we were all sharing rooms and sharing everything. We were sharing clothes. Basically I have a new family, but once it became rainy season, we kind of started to look at actually different housing options. And so when June rolled around, we decided to no longer live in that house. And actually our house split ways, and half of us went to one location and half of us went to another location. And around that time, I had met with a neighbor who was from New Orleans, and he dropped by and he casually mentioned that he was going to be on a flight back home to New Orleans on United. And I was like, what do you mean you're on a flight to New Orleans on United? So I called United that day, and I actually was able to take my same exact flight home that I originally would have had in April, but for June. So it was a combination of things, rainy season, moving out of the house, and flights being kind of back on schedule.
Okay, so this whole thing, Dana, sounds like it needs to be a Broadway show. And in fact, I think there was a similar Broadway show with Come From Away. I keep thinking to myself, I'm like, if one of the 12 of you do not write something, you better be writing this down right now. Like, I need to write the book. And it would be, even if you all wrote the book, it'd be 12 different books because 12 different stories, right? Everyone's got their own story. But what a fascinating tale of bringing people together. And I'm sure within that time, is that how the transition went, the way you're going to now, learning about Death Doula and I don't want to do this corporate world anymore. I want to serve in a whole different way, because usually it's the shift that happens, right? Somewhere in our lives. Why am I here?
Right. Right. Yeah. Living there and living in nature and living with other people really kind of set the tone of the question. Yeah. What am I living for, and what's important to me, and what do I stand for, and all these types of things. And so that was, where that decision was birthed out of. And I also did just finish writing a book. It's a memoir, and the first chapter is about Guatemala, and it'll be coming out in November.
Fascinating. What, do you have a title yet?
May All Beings Be Fed.
May all beings be fed. Dear listeners of Hilistically Speaking, do you hear this? Okay. We might have to have you go back on, or just share some more information about Dana Humphrey, because that's that in itself, just what you shared during the podcast about your journey, and only one portion of that being Guatemala. I can only imagine what the rest of the journey is so far. So how was it for you once you returned?
So, I had always worked in the pet industry, and I had traveled so much. I didn't have a pet for like 10 years. I had a pug named Winston when I was younger. And then as the pet lady, I really was traveling nonstop. Every single week I was on trains, planes, buses, boats, you name it. And I was pet free. And, a lot of people kind of know me as a dog person, and really being in Guatemala, I became a cat person. We had a little cat that I think was our neighbor's that we named her Regina, and she would visit every day. And I really became a cat person. So when I returned to New York, within a couple of weeks of being home, I fostered 2 cats, brother and sister, and now I've adopted them. And I'm a cat mama.
I think what they say, like even in the Native American cultures, that every animal is a spirit animal or a totem in our lives. And I think about that even with my baby girl, Eliza. We had animals around us our whole lives, but she was like the first fur baby. Oh, she must have heard me talking about it. She just walked in and she's like, and cue. Like, she just walked in the room, and she's been on a couple episodes. Come here, girl. And I feel like animals come to us when they're supposed to for a reason. Don't you feel that way?
Oh, yeah. And I think, cats are very spiritual. And Sassy, my female, I mean, she is so sensitive and so in tune. And I swear the moment I turned in the paperwork to go from fostered to adopted, she started treating me differently. She's like, all right, you're going to keep me? Fine. I'll stick around. Yeah. And they're protectors. They're spiritual protectors. So
I also find that they are the litmus test for the energy in the room. And I've actually written about that in my emails, my newsletter. I'm like, Eliza's the litmus test, because if the energy that comes into my home is not positive, I'm like, yeah, you need to go, because Eliza doesn't want you here, right? Or just me, my energy. If my energy goes sour, she's out of here, right? Because she's like, I don't need this. I'm zen, right? So, and you're crazy right now. So, boy, but it's true, right?
Yeah. I mean, I have a meditation practice, and when I meditate, I love it. My male always comes and sits with me, and sometimes both of them come and sit with me. They know it's different when I'm sitting there reading. They definitely tune into the energy.
So with that being said, since animals are so important to you, and you've been the pet lady for years, and you've been around animals, by the way, fun fact, my first pet that I was ever given as a child, like, you get a lot of times you get your animal as a child, was a pug.
Aww.
And I think pugs were not as popular back in the day. Like, they
weren't.
Became more of the, like, people be like, what is that, a boxer or a bulldog? I'm like, oh no, this is a pug. And then my mom became a breeder for a while. So it was like Pugapalooza over at our place.
Oh yeah.
Pug pen, my mom called it, the Russo pug pen. But they're such sweet dogs. They really are. But do you use animals in your work as a death doula?
And
I maybe use is not the right word. Or do they participate in that process?
That's a beautiful question. So far they haven't, but I can definitely see how they could.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about a lot of the animals that become therapy pets.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend actually is training her dog right now. And she's a doctor, so she could take the dog with her to work, be around people that might need her. Maybe they're not in the stage of their life that's terminal, but just in healing. I mean, I know how I feel when my little nurse is around me, So something to consider going forward as you're still building this world around you in the early process of this journey as a death doula.
Well, in my mind, I have like these adventure cats that want to travel with me and be therapy cats, and in reality, they are not.
They just want to be home. Cats are so different. Like, dogs will do anything. Cats are like, can you just leave the key? I'll lock up. They don't want to leave their house. Although I do have a friend, and I'll share this. I'll give her a shout out. I have a friend that I met on a goat yoga retreat.
Beautiful.
That brought her cat. First time I met her, Minerva. So shout out to Minerva, this beautiful little black rescue cat that travels with her everywhere, and especially during this whole pandemic. And I'm like, oh, my cat would not have anything to do with that journey. My cat just wants to stay home. But meanwhile, this cat's on a leash, she like hanging out in the little glamping hut. And I'm like, I don't know. I guess it just depends on the. So ridiculous, right? But different animals, like people, we different personalities, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my cats have all the gear. They have the harnesses, the leashes, the bags, and they are so not interested. They are like, no way, lady. We're staying in your house and we are not coming to the beach. That is not where we want to be.
Totally. Especially as they get older, they're like, no, just no. Right? Because I used to take her to the beach too all the time. But again, she just wants to sit. It's almost like you get the most expensive gift for a child and really they just want to play with the box.
Yeah.
Cats are the same way. They just want to play with the box.
But you're right. I mean, animals do, they notice the energy and they change the energy. So, it's a nice icebreaker for someone who's going through a hard time to be able to just connect with an animal. They don't have to like worry about words or about, saying the right thing or being polite or about awkward. Sometimes people have kind of social awkwardness and interactions. Like with a dog or a cat, it's just like so easy. You just and the animals often sense if they are going through a hard time or maybe in pain. They sense that and they kind of cozy up to them even further.
You actually mentioned something when we were chatting last time about energy. I mean, obviously the work that you do requires a beautiful amount of energy as you're dealing with other energies, right? And with everything you had mentioned that you had been through, in addition to Guatemala, but just the relationships that you've had in the past, and you and I both share the whole, narcissism. We've both been through that, codependency. By being able to work through those breakups and move forward powerfully in a really beautiful direction, what have you taken from those experiences and the energy that was and turned it into something positive for that what you're doing now? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. There's so many ways I can go with this question. What's coming up right now is just, it's, I'm responsible for my life and I'm responsible for my destiny and I'm responsible for my energy. And going through what I've been through and kind of learning that my own patterns kind of were attracting the type of partners that I wanted, I'm now able to recognize how the way that I feel is my responsibility. And if I want to be coming from a place of joy, I need to, create those practices for myself. And so, I used to definitely be a workaholic and just be like constantly grinding out, some kind of, things. And now I really, believe in shamanic time. I spend most of the morning every single day on self-care and maintenance for myself and my own energy so that I can show up with a full cup for the other things that I'm doing. And I do a lot. I'm very active. I have a lot of projects going on, but I'm not coming from a place of scarcity and spinning my wheels and going crazy. I'm coming from a very grounded, centered place. So then everything that I do just works out and flows more easily.
And when you're sharing space with someone who is in those final stages of their lives, I would imagine having that energy be in a more positive place is going to help their experience as well.
Yeah, it's also just really being able to be present. And so, making sure I've released all negative emotions of my past helps me to be present and helps me to be that hollow bone so that I can just be fueled by source energy to be present with that person and not be affected by, my own preferences.
With your time in Guatemala, with the pandemic, and fortunately we're coming out on the other side and we're seeing the world opening and being able to spend time being out there in the world, was that a big part of you slowing down?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, yeah, learning to create a morning routine that works for me was really born during my time in Guatemala. I learned there to wake up early because otherwise I was dealing with 11 other people.
Yeah.
So I started to wake up like at 5:30 in the morning and just spend time outside by myself with the birds and meditate and create meditations and yeah, really slow down and really slow down from this like active mode, and also just being in New York, the energy here is just also just kind of this go, go, go energy. And so being able to kind of balance the two.
I was going to ask you about that, being in the same area as you, coming out of this pandemic, and we've been kind of forced to slow down, which I think was really important. And the lessons that we've learned, hopefully people are walking away with some really powerful lessons, even if it's just one thing. And here we are walking back into maybe an environment that's very fast paced, because it will pick back up. That's just the nature of the circle of life. How do we continue to have some semblance of order and balance in our own lives so that we can take what we learned and take that information and go forward in a more positive way in our lives,
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are experiencing a little bit of overwhelm right now, as we've been kind of isolated and been more internal, and then starting to be invited to things and invited to places and having places to go and things to do, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. And I think it just goes back to at least for me, it's about saying no. It's about really like being able to listen to my body, listen to myself, knowing where my yeses are and knowing where my nos are, because as more invitations and more things become available, I don't want to get kind of sucked into that old pace of just going crazy, going everywhere all the time.
There was a magazine cover recently that just came out in, what was it, New York Magazine? It was New York Magazine. I'm looking at it right now. And it said The Return of Fomo. That's their magazine cover. So now that we're returning, people are starting to feel like, I kind of liked it when I was missing. I mean, I didn't have that fear of missing out. And it really is about finding that balance. There was a recent study done where it said 70% of people who are in the workplace, the office space, do not want to go back full time because they realize the value of time and family. And I don't want to spend 3 hours on a train ride here and there, 2 hours in the car. I want to be with my family, my kids when they wake up. I want to have dinner with my wife or my husband or my partner, whatever, or myself, like just have that 5:30 in the morning with the birds outside moment. So we really need to, I think that's a really powerful lesson to be learned that anyone could take away. So listeners, definitely think about, it's not so much the fear of missing out, but maybe the fear of joy. Fear of missing joy. My friend Lipone, who does the music for the podcast, says fear of missing joy. You don't want to miss the joy. And let me just say real quick, we are talking here with having a beautiful conversation with Dana Humphrey. She is a death doula joining us on HIListically Speaking. If you are interested in these kind of topics, this is one that I have not touched on, and I am really happy to have you here. And definitely, if you are finding this conversation interesting and you think it might benefit someone share it with just one person, and it might make a difference in the life of that one person that you didn't think of. So again, Dana, thank you for being here. And I want to move into some questions I have for you in the work that you do as a death doula. And one is, what does it mean to have a good death?
Yeah. So, back to this fear that a lot of people have. I think the main two fears in our life is fear of public speaking and fear of death. And part of the fear of death is fear of dying alone. And so I believe having a good death is being at peace, being in a place that you want to be, And when you take your last breath, really being clear on who do you want to be around with you. Do you want it to be your partner? Do you want it to be your sibling? Do you want to be, do you want a whole room full of friends? Really getting clear on who do you want to be there for that final breath, and being able to orchestrate that happening if possible. Having someone there to, again, hold your hand. Something as simple as holding your hand can be so significant in helping you feel safe and calm. And also, I think it's important that, we want death to be quick and painless. We don't want it to be long and suffering. And once someone, it's actually a medical term to become in the active dying process, and it can be anywhere from 2 days to 2 weeks. And really, what we've learned is that people who have really let go will have a little bit of a quicker death. And so we're there to help, again, like share the stories, share the secrets, share the grief, so that the letting go has been done a little bit before you get to that active dying process, so that there's not, this holding on and this resistance basically that you are having in transitioning. If you take your last breath and you're able to transition with ease, that would be, I think, a good death.
And you mentioned that there's two fears, the fear of public speaking and the fear of dying, but both go back to the fear of being loved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I accepted while I'm speaking and on this stage? Has my life been full? Have I done the right thing? What's on my epitaph? Who's going to say what at my eulogy? It really goes back to love. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So with what you've shared, and we've focused on the actual individual who's in the crossing process, but this is also helpful for family members as well.
Yeah, a lot of times family, sometimes the person that's dying is totally at peace with it, and they're ready, and they feel, at ease with it, and the family is distraught and upset, and they're the one that's going to be missing that person. So yeah, a lot of times, grief shows up in a lot of different ways and a lot of different phases, and it takes shorter and longer amounts of time for everyone to really process it. And so we are also there for the family members. If there's a loved one that's having a hard time, we can be there to listen to their fears and their problems and their issues, and hold space for their grief as well.
And the thing that people might not know is that this is actually something that is, there's a lot of modalities out there. There's a lot of different ways that we can do things. And you're in something, this involvement with being a death doula is actually something that hospice, you have backing by New York Hospice. This is not just, oh, I'm just coming in, helping you cross over. Like there's some credibility and backing to this. Not that you need that, but I think it helps some of those people who are more of the traditionalists and conservatives that are like, what is this? I'm just supposed to have a funeral. That's the way it is. Stop asking me questions. They're already in a heightened state, right? So how are you reaching those people probably helps to know that there is community and organizations behind you that are saying, hey, you know what? Just find your own way.
Right. Yeah, that's an important thing to mention, is that really it is about, it is really hand in hand with hospice, and someone who chooses to, spend their last couple of months in hospice is already kind of focused on how energetically they want to be, right? You can be in a hospital and you can have a lot of machines and bright lights and visiting hours and lots of rules, or you can be at home, in as much comfort as possible, being taken care of there. And that's really the ideal place where a death doula would come and work with you. So hospice is definitely a partner and advocate for death doula work. And, we're not checking your pulse or doing your temperature or giving you any pills. We're really there to tap into your preferences energetically and make sure that those happen. Something that I think is important to note to mention is we also help people with legacy projects. So maybe they've been an amazing cook in their life, and that could be something that could be a legacy project. Is we help them like transcribe their recipes that are in their head that they've maybe never written down, that can be a beautiful gift for their grandchildren or their children, that they can have, like a 15-page recipe book of grandma's amazing meatballs. And then it helps with that knowing that they are loved and that their love continues, and that they added value and in a legacy project. So we kind of talk about those types of things that we can do with the person. And it's also about, one thing that I love that somebody wanted was having a gratitude chair. So as people are coming to visit them, some people have more friends and family than others. But if you're, the person who's coming to visit the dying person is bringing the energy with them of road rage, that might not be that welcome in this space that you have. So having, a gratitude chair where someone who's coming to visit the dying person, they sit for a couple of minutes, they take their shoes off, they think of some gratitudes, and then they come in. It can be such a more beautiful moment to share. Maybe the person doesn't have a lot of energy and they only want to visit with you for a minute or two. So like maximizing that minute and not coming with all this, force of whatever your day had you in.
I love the idea of the legacy project because it's so therapeutic. I would imagine for both the person who is going through the process of the transition and dying, to the family around them to have something to pass on, because it is all about the stories. I recently had a conversation with a really dear friend of mine. We were talking about how we want to record conversations, and he actually recorded a lot of conversations with his dad before his father died years ago. And my dad's been gone 18 years, and I think about, I even still have his answering machine message from when we used to have answering machines because I want to hear his voice. And I remember when the movie Big Fish came out, which is a movie that's really close to my heart, reminds me of my dad. There's a line in the movie that says, a man tells so many stories that he becomes his stories. They live on after him. And in that way, he becomes immortal. So it's our way of continuing the legacy and telling that person's story. So they're always with you, They're not just gone. They're everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Oh, love that.
The legacy project is really for the giver and the receiver.
Yeah.
And it can be something where, on the anniversary of the death, maybe everyone gets together and makes, grandma's recipes. And that can be a way of celebrating their life.
Oh, I love it. Any way we can continue to celebrate the people that are not with us on this dimension, dimension or on this plane anymore is a day worth celebrating, right? Yeah. Have you lost, I imagine you've lost people close to you that you thought, gosh, this would have been a beautiful way to share with them. I wish I had. Not that we go back to the wish and the woulda, coulda, shoulda, but do you have those moments?
Yeah, I have lost all my grandparents, and I was very close to both of my grandmas. I was actually just speaking about this yesterday with someone who's Canadian. I'm Canadian, and my grandparents are Canadian, and they did not, they were, because of the healthcare system, it's a little bit different there, and they don't actually have hospice in the way that we do. And yeah, I would have loved to be there for my grandparents' deaths, and to, just to offer some peace and calm and tranquility, and understand their wishes and desires, because theirs definitely changed over time. I mean, my grandfather, he had a plot that he had paid for years before, and then he decided he wanted to be buried in as a peach tree and be cremated. And it's such a beautiful thing that he wanted. And and he wanted to be in an ice cream bucket. I mean, it was pretty specific and pretty different than what he had originally, decided. And so the whole family had a little, tree planting ceremony with the peach tree with his ashes in the ice cream bucket. And yeah, it's
what a story. What a beautiful story. I mean, how can you not smile at a story like that? I mean, in old world, right? Like the old world philosophy really is, you get buried, and maybe more progressive is there's cremation. But really, to go from that to that, to this to that is quite phenomenal. And that goes back to what we were originally talking about earlier in this conversation, is people's wants and desires do change in as little as a year. Well, look, in this pandemic, in as little as a couple months, you can be like, don't feel like doing that anymore. I'm the same person, but I've evolved, and I need these things in my life. So, yay, Grandpa. That's amazing. What about for you, though? I mean, I'm sure thinking about your own death has been something that has come up, and how you want it to be for you. Not that you have to give the long laundry list and say, this is what I want. But how has that been for you, and how you think about your own transition?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. Sure. I definitely, it's so interesting. When I was younger, I had a will, and like, even just looking back on that, like there's nothing even part of that I even have anymore. That's, but at the time it was like so important to me to write this will. And, right now at this time in my life, I live in Rockaway, and I live on the beach, and I would definitely see myself being on the beach and having a glitter station. I'm all about dancing and costumes and celebration, and I would love, I know some people are glitter averse, but I would love to have a glitter station with like every color of glitter under the rainbow. And, have people be able to decorate themselves before coming to visit me, and also bringing glitter to spruce onto myself as well, and just really have like a lot of playfulness around my last moments.
Embodying who you are.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, the glitter station sounds amazing. It'd be great to be able to do that as somebody is still present in this life. But what a great send off in a lot of ways. And just how can you not smile at something like that? That's great. I love it.
And we can use biodegradable glitter.
Okay.
It does exist.
All right. Just going to say, so earth friendly. Let's take care of the planet. Don't want to leave anything that isn't going to come with you at some point and become a part of you, right? I'm grateful that you mentioned that. So I want to have a little fun with you. Since we're on glitter, it seems like a really natural transition. So I love to play a little game with my guests, and basically just a little word association. Just going to throw out a word to you, things that we've been talking about, and just without giving it much thought, just come back with the first word that comes to mind. You ready?
All right. Yeah.
Oh, yay. Well, wait, now I got to add another word, right? And I think you know what it is. All right, here we go. Trauma.
Bond.
Doula.
Life.
Guatemala.
Volcanoes.
Okay. Pets.
Love.
Grief.
Despair.
Shaman.
Energy.
Legacy.
Collection.
Death.
Ending.
Glitter.
Gold.
Yes. Because it can be a beautiful cross, right? And as I mentioned earlier, like what the beautiful spiritual leader Ram Dass said, we are all just walking each other home. We really are. Yeah. So on that note, final words, anything, well, not final words, since we're on the topic, I have to be careful using that statement, right? Would you like to share some closing words during this conversation of Hilistically Speaking with the beautiful listeners?
Sure. I'll share. I have a favorite quote that I like to share. It's don't copy the world, be a different person with a fresh newness in all you do and think.
Wow. Love that. And who said that?
It's actually from the Bible.
It is.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to get in trouble for that. Well, no shame, right?
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's really, how did that come to be a quote that you really embody?
I actually found that when I was in high school, and I was in leadership in high school, and I had to make a poster with my favorite quote, and I was really into like the church program, and somehow I think the two things just collided at the right timing for me, and so I made this big poster, and it's stayed with me through all these years, and it's really something that I've tried to embody for my own life, and I like to share with others.
Really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing the quote. Thank you for sharing you. Thank you for opening our minds to possibilities as we consider what is possible in this dimension and another. You know, the more we know, the better, and then we can make more choices that align with who we are. So I appreciate it, and I'm sure our listeners will as well.
Exactly. Thank you.
To learn more about Dana and the work that she shares as a death doula, connect with her on her website. That link is on the podcast page. And if this episode resonates with you, or you know someone who would find value in this conversation, consider sharing Hilistically Speaking with them and just pay it forward. Curious about havening techniques and how I can support you on your healing journey? Well, just reach out to me and let's have a conversation. A complimentary discovery call is my gift to you to be kind to your mind. So just go to hilaryrusso.com/havening and we'll go from there. You can also reach out to me on social media, LinkedIn, and Clubhouse at Hilary Russo. Hilistically Speaking is produced by Alan Seals with music by Litbone Ready and recorded on Squadcast. Thanks for listening, and remember always, be kind to your mind and don't forget to laugh.